join us. Let us conclude our topic, international human rights, by looking at the specialized instruments now. The specialized instruments. So remember the chart I gave you. We have the International Bill of Rights, which comprises the UDHR, adopted in 1948. Then, apart from this, we have the treaty-based instruments. Those two instruments, the ICCPR and the ICESCR, the International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. These two were adopted in 1996. That's why they come after the UDHR here. Apart from these two, I said we also have the specialized instruments. Down here we have the specialized instruments. So we are descending in the number of years there. We are following the number of years. Good. So now, let us look at the specialized instruments. Why are they called specialized instruments? They are called specialized instruments because they deal with one thing, or they focus on a particular human rights issue or on a specific group of people. For example, look at this one. The first one is the International Covenant on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. This is discrimination here. This is discrimination. Good. ICERD. As you have seen here, it only deals with what? Discrimination. So this is a specialized instrument. It was adopted in 1965 but came into force in 1969. The years are very important. They'll ask you the years in which these instruments were adopted and when they came into force. This instrument was drafted to draw attention to racial discrimination. Some of its provisions include condemn racial discrimination, segregation, and apartheid. By this time, there was apartheid in South Africa. So that was the main reason this was formed, so as to draw attention to racial discrimination. Segregating, they say, no, these are whites, these are blacks, because of nationality and everything like that. Ethnicity, discrimination here. Prohibit the practice of racial discrimination by individuals or organizations. So, as you have seen here, the main focus of the ICERD is on discrimination. So this is the first specialized instrument. The second specialized instrument is the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. For the first one, it's just discrimination in general. Racial discrimination. Now, for this one, it's discrimination against what? Women. It was adopted in 1979. It is often known as International Bill of Rights for Women. It protects the rights of women. The summary of its provisions include embody the principle of equality of men and women, promote equality between men and women, eliminate all forms of discrimination against women, eliminate discrimination in the enjoyment of civil and political rights. Now, it has got an optional protocol that allows the United Nations Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women to receive and hear cases of violations of women's rights. This means that, as we learned in the first video, an optional protocol is not legally binding. It's not a mandatory. Countries need to choose whether to accept or not. So this one has got an optional protocol to which, when a country signs, it will have a provision or an opportunity of complaining to the United Nations Human Rights Committee about the cases of discriminating women. As a woman, when your rights have been violated, you can complain to the United Nations Committee, provided the country in which you are living has signed to this optional protocol. So that this one has got an optional protocol. The third one is the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, the CAT. As you have seen, they are all dealing with one thing. This one is dealing with torture, cruel, that is the same as inhuman treatment or degrading punishment. In other words, corporal punishment. This one protects citizens against that. It was adopted on 10th December 1984, as it's the opposite of the UDHR. The UDHR is 10th December 1948, so the 8 has moved from the end. It has come here between 9 and 4, and it has become 1984. Not really the matter, just know that it was adopted on 10th December 1984. Do not confuse this one with the UDHR. UDHR is 1948. Zambia signed this convention in 1998. Summary of its provisions: prohibit torture, not to referral, punish torturers, control the system of interrogation and detention, etc. Let me explain on this one. Not to referral. To referral is simply to send a person back to his or her home country for punishment. Maybe you stay in Zambia, then you have committed a crime. Let's assume you need to be punished by death penalty. Then you run to another country, for example, Malawi. There, according to this instrument, the Specialized Instruments, the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Malawi should not send you back to Zambia so that you'll be persecuted. No. It's very interesting. These are some of its provisions. These are some of its provisions. The last one is the International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers and Members of Their Families, CMW 1990. This means it was adopted in 1990. It was adopted to ensure that migrant workers whose rights have been violated may seek judicial remedy. Who are migrant workers? These are people working from countries which are not theirs. You are a Zambian, then you are working from Malawi or Tanzania. Then you'll be called a migrant worker. Now, migrant workers include the following people. We've got the frontier workers. The frontier workers. Don't know how you can pronounce that one, but the frontier or the frontier. The frontier workers live in a neighboring country to which they return daily or once a week. For example, you are just near the border. Then you work from another country. After a week, you go back to your own country. You'll be called the frontier worker. Or you return daily to your own country. You'll be called the frontier worker. We're talking about migrant workers, people working from countries which are not theirs. 2, we've got seasonal workers. Seasonal workers, these are simply citizens who get works in foreign countries during specific seasons, e.g. during the time of harvesting or during the time of planting. They come, they get employment. After that season, they will go back to their own countries. Those are called seasonal workers. We've got the seafarers. The seafarers are simply those workers employed on water vessels registered in a country other than their own. Water vessel registered in another country, not in their own country. So they'll be employed to that country that has got that sea vessel. D, we have workers on offshore installations, which are under the authority of a country other than their own. So the offshore installations are under the authority of another country, not their own country. So they'll be employed to that country under which the authority is belonging. Itinerant workers will move from place to place in search of work. You move from place to place. Come from Malawi, come to Zambia, then start moving from Lusaka, you go to Copperbelt. From Copperbelt, you go to Chingola. Just moving like that, looking for employment. You are a migrant worker, but you'll be called an itinerant worker. Migrants employed for a specific project. Migrants employed for a specific project, e.g., constructing roads or dams. They employ, let me give a practical example of the Chinese people. They are migrant workers, but they are only employed for a specific project of constructing roads, bridges, or dams. Then we have self-employed workers. Maybe a person is from Malawi, but he or she has got a shop in Zambia, or a hospital, or just another business that offers him or her employment. That one is a self-employed worker, but he or she is a migrant worker because it's not a citizen of Zambia. Now, here I was talking about the types of migrant workers. The types of migrant workers. On this one, the frontier workers, those. Now, let me talk about the summary of its provisions. It protects the rights of migrant workers. Then I was explaining some of the migrant workers that we have. Now, let me talk about the summary of its provisions. No discrimination of migrant workers and their families. Because this person comes from Malawi, from Tanzania, then you'll be discriminating. It prohibits that. Protect the right to life of migrant workers. Protect migrant workers from torture and cruelty. Migrant workers have freedom of movement. They can go back to their own country, come back again to Zambia. They go just like that. They have got freedom of movement. Protect migrant workers against forced labor. Migrant workers have protection of privacy of home and property, etc., etc. These are some of the provisions of this convention. So we have 4 conventions here. Remember, we have 4 conventions. The first one is simply the International Covenant on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. The first one deals with the racial discrimination. The second one deals with discrimination against women. Discrimination against women. Then the third one deals with torture, cruel, or inhuman treatment. Then the last one deals with protection of the rights of all migrant workers. Migrant workers. Migrant workers include these people: the frontier workers, the seasonal workers, the seafarers, workers on offshore, and others, as we have learned. It's very important to know your rights. It's very cardinal. Make sure you research more on this topic. Thank you very much for watching.